how Trump is ending another week of losses. We have photos and imagery from Washington that shows the limits of Trump's power. This is the live picture at the Kennedy Center. You have the scaffolding. Workers are going to be removing Trump's name because no matter how much he wishes he was the kind of king, autocrat, or leader who could decree something and that's all it would be, we still have a system with the rule of law. And while it's been strained and stressed, and I've told you that, and I'm not here to tell you everything works perfectly, this delisting of this ham-handed effort by Trump to slap his name on the Kennedy Center speaks to the fact that the courts on matters large, medium, and sometimes small and vanity-related are still the final word in this country, even if MAGA and Trump folks wish they weren't. It follows another ruling from a federal judge about removing his name. The Trump DOJ is trying to see if they can find a way around this, but that's the current law of the land. And the growing legal pushback has changed what Trump can get away with. His DOJ dealt a fresh loss on that criminal fund where they already got frozen in court. Now a federal judge says they're blocking any such fund. And that could limit even the backdoor efforts we've read about this week where they said, well, what if we call it a different name or channel it through a different place? Well, if there's a judicial order blocking it, that will prevent the federal government from releasing those funds, period. Now, Trump's DOJ gets a week to enter a clear and unambiguous declaration that the fund is dead, that must be signed, note this, by the Treasury Secretary and the head of the DOJ. That's putting multiple officials on record. Of course, Treasury is where the money would come from, typically. And DOJ, if they try to use that other fund I mentioned, well, they both would be barred from it. It is a huge setback for Blanche. 10 days ago, he was the one trying to dodge on what the plans were, even as this thing was flailing in court.
You established it in writing, so it just makes sense to rescind it in writing. I think a lot of Americans, both sides of the aisle, are concerned about it, and it would restore a lot of trust about this issue.
Okay, I'm not committing to doing anything in writing.
Not committing. No. Okay.
I mean, I'll take it under advisement.
A judge is basically telling Blanche's DOJ to stop with the games. If you've followed our coverage this week, remember I mentioned that in typical times, the DOJ gets some trust, but increasingly they don't trust the DOJ. Then there's the White House UFC edition. Take a listen.
1 p.m., folks beginning to line up over toward the mall and over toward the White House, and then a line of perhaps strong to severe thunderstorms around 2, 3 o'clock. Once that batch moves on out, it appears that we're in the clear, but it does not necessarily mean it's going to be the case. Another round of strong to severe thunderstorms are possible at that point with gusty winds and heavy downpours, and by 9, 10 o'clock, that's when things should begin to clear on out.
If you don't need a weatherman to tell you which way the wind blows, the takeaway there is at least a risk of a rain on Trump's parade, so to speak. Apologies to Dylan. More seriously, though, is the question of corruption. The White House has talked a lot about how Trump's not personally involved in stuff, but of course, he does own underlying company stock in the UFC. They've been donating to Trump. The corporate logos are everywhere. Polymarket, Crypto.com. Polling shows Americans disapprove of this. Only a quarter think that this whole distraction, vanity, sort of fun fight on the White House lawn makes any sense while we are at war with gas prices surging. So you take it all together, and of course the stories are related. We didn't know when we were preparing our broadcast tonight that we would get this merger news so late in the day Friday. But that merger news, as our guest Che pointed out, has to do with whether the government is being run in a fair way for your benefit as the citizen and taxpayer, or whether it is in collusion with other rich, powerful entities that are designed to extract value from both the government, tax dollars, and our country at your detriment. That's not a left or right point. It might be, I guess, vaguely about fairness or populism, but that's a lot of what's happening, even as Donald Trump insists that this period of his presidency should focus on promoting himself and his name on the buildings and his distraction reality show gambits when Americans are increasingly fed up. Busy Friday night in Washington beyond. I'm back with Che and Juanita. Juanita, your views, I just ran through a lot, but what's on your mind here tonight?
Like, Ari, I feel like we're in an episode of The Simpsons, and we know they predicted a lot of moments. They predicted a Trump presidency, including the tacky escalator. Did they predict a cage match, Ari, at the White House? I need somebody to go back through the Simpson archives, because this all feels absolutely absurd. It feels absurd to see this happening. It feels absurd for the timing of it happening, but we know Trump loves to use taxpayer dollars to throw himself a birthday party, just like he did last year with the military parade, which very few people attended. I'm looking at this UFC event, though, and all I see is dollar signs, Ari. Not just the corporate sponsors you mentioned in Trump's stakes at UFC, or the fact that I believe one of the crypto funds that is sponsoring this event has ties to one of Trump's sons as an advisor as well. But I'm also thinking about the taxpayer dollars wrapped up in this. AP reported at least $60 million from taxpayer funds are going to this, and coordination across 7 federal agencies to pull this off, all the way from the FAA to the Secret Service. And this is at a moment when Donald Trump has repeatedly said, I don't care about taxpayers' wallets when I make decisions. I don't care about the issues they're facing. And so I'm looking at this, and the other number you highlighted, this is deeply unpopular. 51% unapproval, I think, was on the screen earlier. No one wants this. People do not want this. They certainly don't want their taxpayer dollars used for it. And so I'm curious to see how this is yet another thing, another stunt that Trump uses to weigh down Republicans as we head into November.
And that really goes to what you see on the screen. People don't want this. People are recoiling against the economy. That's the reality versus the reality show, which Che mentioned in terms of the White House obsession about trying to buy, cajole, or pressure coverage that's different than discussing these problems. And so, Che, take a listen to how some of it, though, is playing on Fox.
Trey, what do you say to our viewers who love Donald Trump and they support him, they trust him, they believe he's talking to the right people and making the right moves, but they're tired of this, and they see that the midterms are around the corner, they want our economy to get back on track and our gas prices to drop?
You know, there's a kind of a little hint of awareness there, Che. And then the Republican senators who are leaving the body are stronger. And then the blind quotes from the less courageous anonymous folks are even stronger, including ending the week with the hunt for the leaker who dared say that the Trump folks were rattled by Epstein. What do you see in all of this after another tough week for them?
Yeah, it's been a tough week, and I think they know it's going to get tougher. And I thought that question was rather strange, where the Fox morning people were saying, "Hey, what do you say to people who love Trump and really believe in him, but kind of don't believe in him anymore, kind of think that maybe this isn't so right, and kind of think that, like, the gas prices are high and the food prices are high. What do you say to them?" It was almost like an acknowledgement that things are not going well. And as much as Trump wants to say that things are going great, they simply are not. And the cage match is a big part of this. This is America's 250th birthday. And if you just compare the feeling around the bicentennial and the centennial, if you go back historically and just look at it, the idea of doing a cage match, it didn't come out of The Simpsons, but it does come out of the movie Idiocracy, where something like that actually does occur. And that's, when people see that, even if you like Trump, you got to think something's off and something's really wrong in the way that America is celebrating its 250th birthday.
Juanita?
I also want to highlight, this isn't about America 250, even though the posters outside the cage match do say Freedom 250. This is on Trump's birthday. This is a gift to himself. And I'm thinking about that in terms of whatever gains come from the UFC where he owns stocks. I'm thinking about whatever gains go to Paramount Plus, which I believe is live streaming this event. Like, I think that that's what it comes down to. But when you talk about things being explicitly wrong, there's only so much you can butt up against reality. And that's what I think that the Fox host was getting to, the fact that people can't put food on their table. They can't pay their rent. They are struggling to find jobs as layoffs continue. There's no way, there's no message that you can counteract the reality and the struggle that people are feeling. And I saw some coverage on MS Now earlier this week where 3-time Trump voters were like, we know he doesn't care about us. We know now. And so they're feeling the consequences of a Trump administration. They're feeling the reality that some of this could have been avoided. Gas prices didn't need to shoot up if Trump and Netanyahu didn't start a war with Iran. Grocery prices and inflation might be in a different place if Trump hadn't started a tariff war that destabilized an entire global economy. And so they're seeing and feeling the impact of Trump in a way, sadly, that is truly harming them on a day-to-day basis, that a message on Fox News is not going to be able to penetrate. And it's something that I'm sure is going to be going with them into the polls as we see those enthusiasm gaps between Democratic and Republican voters, where Republicans are at a deficit and independent voters are peeling away from Republican support. And that is a massive red flag for every Republican on the ballot, because we know Trump's not on the ballot, but he will absolutely continue to drag them down ahead of these midterms with every stunt that he pulls.